just going to try and do a little repair, or modification is probably the best word for it, because we're going to try and modify this machine to be able to take a SD drive without actually adding extra hardware other than probably a piece of wire. So there's two ways of doing it depending on the drive you've got in the machine. Most of them are, or rather most of the tape drives are based on the second part of this video, which is the easiest way of modifying your Spectrum Plus 2 grey. The first one's a bit more involved. It's only a couple of wires, but at the end of the day, most people will have the drive in the second part of this video, so it will make it a much easier fix and a much easier project for people. So if you watch it all the way through, you'll see both, and then you can try that on your own machine if you want to do so, okay? But also always remember, when you plug anything into a Spectrum, regardless if it's a 48, 128, plus 2, plus 2A, plus 3, always plug everything in before you actually turn the machine on. So if you're plugging in an SD drive, do it before, because small piece of static electricity left in the drive, because some of them do hold a little bit of charge once it's switched off, can actually damage these machines, and it's regardless of which modification you've got on your machine or not. So okay, so just a little bit of advice. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Thank you. Okay, so we have a stripped ZX Spectrum Grey Plus 2. Now you have a small circuit board there, which is basically a preamp, and what it does is it smooths out the signals it gets from the cassette recorder, then it amplifies it, and then sends it through to the system board. So it literally goes from this point, from the head through to here. The signal then gets amplified slightly, and then it goes through to the board. Now, rather than adding in circuitry, what I'm going to try and do is to use the original hardware. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the live pin from this head, and I'm going to take it through to the board, direct to the board, and then what we're going to use is use the original amp to power what would have been the original connection on here. Somebody's already soldered these wires on here, which aren't particularly brilliant, but I'm going to use them to test with, and then I'll change them once it's all done and dusted. So that's what we're going to do. So we don't particularly need the power running to the board just to check to see if we get a signal through. So we're going to just use the actual audio line through and then see how it goes. Okay, so the idea is to solder a new point onto here and then feed it through your cassette deck, and it will basically pick up the signal from where the head is, and then all we need to do is modify a switch underneath the cassette deck, so you don't have to then press play to activate it. So that's the plan. So let's have a bit of a go. Got a live connection to the head, which then feeds the audio stream, which is this blue, and that goes to the input on here. I've extended the cables, which I'll need to put sleeves on and solder them up in a minute. All the other cables have been extended just for ease of use, which I need to solder together. And then you've got the earth, which comes to here, which is your original earth. So you've taken a feed from here. So that, when you press play, should preamp any signal that's coming in and then go to the board. Well, that's the theory, so that's what we're going to do now. And then we're going to shortcut the switch on the back, so we don't need to press play after that. So you kind of should be able to use the cassette and an SD card. And now we're just reassembling the unit into the case, just so we can test it out. Okay, so we have a reassembled cassette motor back in the case, And all I have to do now is just do the last connection, which is the white cable. Okay, and this is the end result. It's now playing or loading Manic Miner from an SD card through a direct connection to the tape head. And as you can see, it's loading the game in quite nicely, so it works on all count. It's a nice way of using an SD card or an SD tape drive on a grey +2. Now as you can hear, you've got Monty playing in the background, and it works. But on some models, now here's another cassette deck. Now on some models, you can see on this cassette deck, you have to connect the cable or your 3.5mm jack directly to the heads. See, this is a slightly different model. Depending, if it doesn't work on the earth, you have to connect it to these two poles instead. Either audio and earth, or put it straight across these two poles, so one cable goes here and the other goes here, and then it'll work exactly the same. The easiest way is to connect a 3.5mm jack directly to the read head over the tape player. So here's the SD card running on a Spectrum Plus 2 without any room modifications other than a small piece of wire, depending on which tape drive you have in there. And here is Manic Miner loading. And now we have Manic Miner running on a Plus 2 without any room modifications. Okay, and with this modification as well, if you unplug the SD tape emulator, you can also use a standard tape recorder. And it makes no difference because it works with either, with very little modification to the machine itself. And as you can see, it's loading as normal. This time it's Monty on the run. So you can use both, and it's maybe a pound's worth of materials. You know, an old 3.5mm jack plug off of probably an old ZX Spectrum you have lying around, or something similar, and that's it really. And all I'm going to do is put a female jack on the back, so I can just plug a normal 3.5mm male to male into it, and then take away the wire, so I don't have the wire hanging out of the back of the machine. But this is just a test and to make sure it all works. So the easiest way to do it is to take your brand new lead, your 3.5mm jack, through to the play head on the cassette recorder. And if that doesn't work, then you follow the first way I showed you, which is a little bit more involved because you've got a slightly different tape deck, but it's still only running the earth. And that's it. That's all you have to do. And it doesn't take much. It takes about 15 minutes. But as I say, try direct to the head first, and you'll find 99% of the times it works. There is the odd tape drive which then requires an earth on the back because the system board is different, or the little preamp is different. But other than that, that's it. You don't need to worry too much about it. It's a very simple fix. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope we'll meet again on this channel very shortly. I'm going to try and keep up with looking at retro PCs or retro computers, and do some more reviews on the hardware as we get to that. I'm also going to do some educational videos, because obviously with the time it is, with schools around the world being shut down, we're having to home educate our children. So I'm going to look into and see if a classic computer is able to do that, and if it's still relevant today. But that's on my next videos coming up. So thanks again, I hope you subscribe, and let's meet on this channel again. Thank you.